Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Courage to Become podcast. I'm Joe, your host, and today's episode is all about conditioning in our defined centers. So, last week we talked about the undefined centers and how they make us more open to external influences. But our defined centers also have a superpower in our everyday lives and are also impacted by our conditioning. And so today I want to explore how being in a defined center can create patterns or beliefs that feel so natural to us that we very rarely question them, and while they give us the consistency and the strength that we need, sometimes they can turn our strengths into a rigidity that makes us feel stuck or resistant to change. So if you've ever found yourself thinking, oh, that's just the way I am, then this episode is for you because we're going to talk about how that's not just the way you are. Sometimes we need to open ourselves up more. We need to let go of that rigidity and really explore who it is we are supposed to be being. So first, I want to review what it means to have a defined center in human design. Defined centers are shown in the human design chart as colored in shapes. So as you can see in the graph behind me, all of these that are colored in are defined. All of those that are white are open. When those centers are colored in, they are defined. And defined centers represent areas in our energy where there's a consistent and reliable access to energy. These centers are how we naturally express certain traits, how we make decisions, and how we interact in the world. It's the vibe that we put out, if you will. It's the aura that other people perceive of us. So, for example, someone with a defined throat center is designed to express themselves consistently and impactfully. That's just how the defined throat center works. But they often find it natural to communicate and to make things happen. Like they know that that's just who they are. They're somebody that's going to make things happen. And so their voice is very powerful when it comes to manifestation and influence. And so a good example of this would be a teacher. Let's say a teacher with a defined throat center who consistently uses their own voice to inspire and educate the students around them. They have a natural way, if you will, of commanding that attention and delivering the lessons that they're offering with clarity and conviction. It's in their throat center, it's in that definition. And so it makes their communication very impactful. And so their students often look to them as guidance or for guidance, as a source of guidance and motivation. Another example of this would be somebody with a defined sacral center. So the sacral center is the center that makes us a generator or gives us the energy. This is the sacral center right here, this pink one. And this is the energy center that gives us energy. So a person with a defined sacral center has consistent access to this life force energy. And all generators have access to this. And this is why generators are supposed to be doing what lights them up. Because when you're doing what lights you up, it gives you the energy to keep going. But this energy is specifically, or not specifically, but particularly for work and creation. And so we're designed to use this energy in response to what lights them up. And that often gives them the stamina that they need to be able to do the activities that they enjoy. So an example of this would be an artist. So an artist that has a defined sacral center is going to continuously pour into their creative projects, right? And they feel energized because they're responding to an idea or an inspiration that came to them that excites them. And when they're excited about something, they often work tirelessly and what feels like effortlessly. They don't feel like they're getting drained, even if they've been at it all day long. They're able to sustain that energy, and they're able to do that because it comes from the alignment of what brings them joy and fulfillment. When we do what we love as generators, it's going to bring us that joy and that fulfillment and that constant flow of energy that we need to keep going. So because the defined centers are where the energy is the most stable, they can feel very fixed. And this is often a good thing because you're going to be able to feel that energy the same way every time, so you can recognize it. And this is where some of our unique gifts come through. But conditioning sometimes causes us to over rely on these strengths from these defined areas, and that causes us to become rigid. And it helps us, it causes us to become rigid in how we use them. And so this is one way that we're taught to hold on to things for too long. And so it helps us to understand how this conditioning happened, what in our lives happened that created this conditioning. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, because conditioning in a defined center happens when external influences like family, society, or culture cause you to feel like you need more, or you need to do more, or be more, or it causes you to subconsciously, because you're not aware of it, amplify this unhealthy need to prove your worth. So let me just give you examples. So for example, if you have a defined heart center, it's part of your natural energy to have that energy center defined. But conditioning could amplify that, which could lead you to push yourself to achieve and overachieve, even when it's unnecessary or harmful. When we have a defined heart center, we tend to try to prove ourselves. And this is part of how we are conditioned. It's part of how the energy of a defined heart center works. But when we are extremely conditioned and paying attention to everything outside of us, it can cause us to go a little bit overboard with this conditioning, and it can cause this rigidity. It can cause us to feel stuck. And so some things that may cause you to feel this way are maybe being told as a child that you need to be more like your brother or your sister or somebody else in your family. And that causes you to feel like you're not enough, like you need to do more, do better, be better. And you're always constantly feeling like you're not good enough, which that in turn causes you to strive for external validation. So that external validation comes through that defined heart center as you trying too hard or putting in more of an effort than you need to be, and then feeling like you need to stick with that. You always need to be that rigid. Always need to try hard, do good, be better, do better. Another way that this can show up is the fear of letting other people down, because you feel like you need to always be the strong one. And this comes up a lot for moms. But this can cause burnout, because if you're not taking care of you, there's nothing left over for you to take care of other people. The best way for you to take care of other people is to take care of yourself first. Because when you nurture you, you have plenty of that energy left over to support other people. So let's look at the emotional solar plexus. This is another area where you can become rigid. Someone with this definition, the emotional solar plexus center defined, which is this brown center on the right-hand side of your chart. Someone with this emotional solar plexus center defined is likely going to feel like they're really deeply in tune with their own emotions. But conditioning can teach them to suppress their feelings or to maintain emotional control, even when they feel the need to speak up or express their concerns or cry. And this causes an internal conflict. And so I'm going to give you an example from my own life, which some of you may have already heard this, but I think it's worth talking about again because if it can help just one more person out there, then it's well worth it. So I have a defined emotional solar plexus, which means that I feel my emotions extremely deeply and intensely. And sometimes I cry over the littlest thing. Commercials on TV, an animal that's hurt. I am one of those people that I have the birds outside my window. I talk to my birds all day. That's just who I am. But when I was a child, my dad's nickname for me was Wine Ass. And obviously, he meant it in a very joking manner. But what that did was that taught me to hide parts of myself. That taught me to suppress my emotions. That taught me to hide how I was feeling. And as I got older and I learned to suppress my feelings really well, I believed that there was something wrong with me because I cried all the time. I believed that my emotions made me not worthy. I believed that I had to overcompensate because there was something wrong with me because I cried too much. And I constantly worried about what people would think of me if they saw me crying. So I learned to hold it back and I learned to bottle up my emotions. And this is something that we need to slowly break down. And first, we need to figure it out and then we need to break it down. And while I've been doing this work for quite a while, a few years now, there are still times when I find it extremely difficult to talk about my feelings, especially and mostly with those closest to me. I can come on here and talk to you about my feelings, no problem at all. But to sit down and talk to my husband about how I feel, that's a whole different ballgame. And I still have challenges with that every single day. But that is how I was conditioned. And part of my deconditioning is to work through that. I was conditioned to tame myself, to avoid making other people feel uncomfortable, and to avoid myself being rejected. And it's really hard when you're conditioned a certain way to break that down. But what happened with me is that left me becoming or seeming to be rigid to other people. So sometimes people used to say that I was cold and distant. And I know that that was because I have learned to suppress those parts of myself. I don't want people to know that I cry at the drop of a hat because as a child, I was judged for that. And even as an adult, I got judged for that. I can remember we went to the movie Castaway when I was pregnant. Now, any of you who have ever been pregnant or had a baby know that the hormones are raging, right? And I bawled my eyes out, and my husband kept saying to me, "You're embarrassing me. Can you please be quiet?" But when he lost his basketball, I couldn't help it. I don't know if it was the baby, thinking about losing the baby because I was pregnant at the time. I don't know what it was, but I literally lost it in the movie theater. And not that my husband is that kind of a person where he doesn't want to see my emotions. He's seen me cry over commercials and things like that, and he doesn't say a word. But even hearing him say that as an adult brought that back for me. And doing this work allows you to understand why you are the way you are so that you don't feel so bad about yourself. But even though you know why you are the way you are, sometimes it's really difficult to break down the conditioning of how you've been for most of your life, if not all of your life, because you were trained to be that way because other people made you feel like you couldn't express your emotions. And this is just one example. There's so many different examples that we can use. But these defined centers have been or can be conditioned. And when they are, they're a little bit more difficult to find. So it's really important to understand what each of the energy centers processes for you and how that energy is supposed to support you so that you can pay attention or practice awareness to those areas of your life where you may be too rigid, but this is a good thing because when you realize you're too rigid, it's leading you to exactly where you need to become deconditioned. So I want to go over just a few of the centers. I won't go over them all because there's 9 of them, and we're going to keep this to a limited time limit so that I don't keep you all day because I could literally talk about this for hours upon hours. But I'll go over a few of the energy centers and how rigidity may look in each of these centers so that you can practice that awareness and see, okay, is this an area I need to look into? Do I need to decondition myself in this area? So in the head center, if you have a defined head center, rigidity may show up as feeling like you have to hold on to your own ideas and you don't want to consider anyone else's ideas. You're not open to perspectives. You're not willing to hear what other people say or other people's ideas in how to do whatever it is you're talking about or thinking about. Conditioning can cause you to, when you're rigid, conditioning can cause you to reinforce a belief that being right is more important than being open. And one thing I will tell you with the head center is that it is very important to be open because you never know when somebody else's perspective might actually mesh well, even with a part of your perspective. And maybe you can create something extraordinary that you would never have even dreamed possible. This is how creation works, but you have to stay open to the possibilities. The defined sacral center, which the sacral center is the left side of your body graph. I'm sorry, the right side. No, the left side. I'm looking at it backwards here. The left side of your body graph. So when you're looking at it on the left-hand side, if you're in the body, it's on the right-hand side. You may overcommit to projects or responsibilities because you're so used to having that energy going. And conditioning might convince you that slowing down or resting is a sign of weakness. But everybody needs rest, right? So it's very important to pay attention to that. Listen to your body. If you don't have that energy to keep moving, if it's not lighting you up, don't keep going. That's being too rigid. That's pushing yourself too far. Another area that this rigidness shows up is in our G center. That's our heart center. That's this one here in the middle, the yellow. You may also feel very certain about who you are or where you're going, but sometimes you feel so certain that you resist change, even if that change can lead to growth. Conditioning may reinforce the idea that staying true to yourself means never evolving. Life is an evolution. You constantly need to be evolving. You constantly need to be learning. But you also have to open yourself up again to different perspectives and different possibilities. You maybe you have an idea of who you want to be and where you want to go, but if you limit yourself to who that is and how that is, the universe has this way of being able to open you up to even bigger things than you ever imagined possible. But when you are stuck in that rigidity, the universe believes that that is as far as you want to go and it's going to stop you there. So sometimes by being so rigid, it prevents you from really exploding and being as powerful and as impactful as you could be. The root center, which is the bottom square, which on my graph is brown here. This center, when you're too rigid, you may feel like you're under pressure to act and to make sure that things happen quickly. And what happens is that this causes you to believe that there's this constant drive and that is just who you are. Rather than recognizing it is okay to slow down. It is okay to take a break. Listen to your body. If you have the pulse to act, then act. If you don't, if it's a thought in your head that's causing you to push forward, that's not the right answer. The thoughts from your head, if they're not good, they're not God. We need to learn to drop into our heart center and make decisions from our heart, because that's really where all the action is. When you're rigid and you have a defined throat center, when you are overly conditioned to become rigid, you may be overly attached to how you communicate, feeling that your way of expressing yourself is the only way or the right way. But what happens is that stops you from adapting to or experimenting with other forms of communication. And what if one of those other forms of communication is a better way? What if it reaches more people? What if it has more impact? You don't know unless you try. And so these are ways in which your energy centers can show where you're being too rigid. So pay attention if any of those elements come up for you, because that means that you have a little bit of work to do. And being conditioned is a completely normal part of life, but it causes us to become disconnected from our authentic self, that true self within, and our own inner guidance system. And that is what causes tension and disease in our bodies. All of us are conditioned. There's no way around it. From the moment of our birth, someone somewhere outside of us is conditioning us, and it isn't something that we're ever taught that we need to address, which is another part of human design that I love, because it teaches us that there isn't anything wrong with us. It's part of the process of finding our purpose. The conditioning that we are exposed to, while it can be painful to unravel, it serves a purpose. And that purpose is to support you on your own personal growth. All of the experiences that you have had in your lifetime, all of the challenges are lessons. And as you master these lessons, you grow and you evolve into the highest version of you. But when you're rigid in these areas, you don't have the ability to break through that rigidity until you start practicing these things in order to break that apart so that you can really explore who are you on the inside. So some of the things that you want to pay attention to that might be causing you to resist change. First of all, ask yourself, is this truly how I want to respond, or is this a conditioned reaction? That's the first question you want to ask. Then you want to start looking outside your comfort zone. Challenge yourself to step outside your comfort zone. For example, if you're conditioned to always be a fixer in relationships, that could be because maybe you have a defined sacral or a defined root center, because those are characteristics of somebody who's always a fixer. Experiment with allowing somebody else to take the lead. Let them see what it's like, and then let you see what it's like to see how somebody else can do. And maybe they can do a fantastic job. Maybe you can see by watching them how together you could do something even better. You also want to lean on your undefined centers for balance. Your undefined centers offer insight and adaptability. Allow them to open you to the possibilities of different perspectives. Our open centers are where we take in energy from other people and we amplify it. So we learn a lot as we're going through this process. So start paying attention to that and use what you've learned in those open centers to counteract your balance. Make sure that you're stepping outside your comfort zone and trying new things, and feel through it as you're doing it to see how it feels. And the most important thing is you need to practice compassion for yourself. Remember that your defined centers, any part of your design, none of it is a flaw. They're all gifts. And the goal isn't to change who you are, but to recognize where conditioning might be holding you back so that you can find more freedom in your natural energy. Understanding your conditioning in your defined centers is essential for living a more aligned and authentic life. When you recognize where you're becoming rigid or set in your ways, you create space to embrace new possibilities. You break the mold. You open that up to be able to open up or invite in new perspectives. Your defined centers are your strengths. These are what make you who you are. And by loosening the grip of conditioning, you can use those strengths in ways that feel freer, more expansive, and more connected to your true self. So I really hope that this information has helped you today. Thank you for joining me on this powerful exploration of defined centers and conditioning. And I hope that this episode has inspired you to look at your own chart and to open yourself up. Look at your chart with curiosity and compassion and open yourself up to what other possibilities are out there for you. What did you discover about your defined centers? Are there areas where you feel conditioned or stuck? And I would love to hear your insights. Share them on social media or leave a comment below. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to support you in helping you to understand what your energy says about you. If you're enjoying this podcast, please don't forget to sprinkle some love on the like button, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who you might feel may benefit from learning a little bit more about human design and who they may be on the inside at their authentic level. Next week, we'll dive into the fascinating world of authority in human design. Authority is how you are uniquely designed to make decisions that feel aligned for you. These are decisions that are purposeful in your life, helping to guide you toward finding your purpose. And so you're not going to want to miss this. So until then, remember that you are perfectly designed to live your most authentic life. Trust yourself and trust in your energy. Peace. I'll see you next time.